Hello, everybody. Sorry I couldn't make it today. Actually, I'm not. I'm starting my vacation early. I didn't want to leave Anna in the lurch, though. This is a course we've been planning for a while, and we want to keep things moving because we know you got to do your dissertation. What I'm going to talk about is full text searching. We've got databases now that offer you the chance to search across the text for among hundreds of thousands of records, including millions and millions of words of text. And so, what you want to try to do is come up with relevant material, not a lot of extraneous things in your search results, but you also want to make sure that it's comprehensive or as comprehensive as possible so that you're not missing anything. And to do that in the full text searching environment is actually quite an art, and there's a little bit of science to it. What I'm going to show you today are some tips and techniques that you can use to help you filter to get that relevance and that comprehensiveness. The example that I'm going to give you today is actually a real life example from another database. I've kind of extracted everything so that it just looks like a generic database. We have at least 30 databases you can search, and I'm sure you can find more. They all work the same way, or rather, they all have a very similar functionality. Not exactly the same, but close enough that you can use these tips and techniques. However, they don't always do it in the same way. So when I show you these techniques, it'll be in a very generic sense, and I'll teach you the terms that we're using to do these limiting and this expanding of searches. And what you might have to do sometimes, if it doesn't work exactly the way I'm showing you, is of course just look in the help. And if you know these phrases, you know these terms for the procedures that I'm going to show you, you should be able to negotiate through a full text search. So as I said, this is a real life example. There was a few years ago, a student was actually doing a search. She was looking for information on vessel length in relation to carrying capacity. So we just typed that right into a full text box, right? So let's see what we get. You can see this very first hit looks like something that perhaps she would be interested in. However, if you look at the next three, you've got something here on gene therapy, you've got something about blood flow and metabolism, and then you've got something from a criminal law review. And so obviously we've got some irrelevant stuff in our searches. Now, not only that, we found 2,753 records have been retrieved. So if you're looking here at 1 out of 4 seems to be relevant, and you've got over 2,700 to go through, that's a lot of work. We obviously want to figure out ways to make a shortcut of this and come out with a much narrower subset that is still relevant and without missing too much in the way of comprehensiveness. Let's look a little bit about why these even came up. So let's look at the second one here, or excuse me, the one on the criminal law review. You've got on page 67 in the abstract, you've got the word length. Several sentences later, you've got in carrying. Page 75, relation. And then if you look on page 110, you've got a footnote, and it's not even anything but a metaphor when they're referring to an empty vessel. So this came up because it met our search criteria. Those words were used in that document, even though they happened to be spread out across a couple hundred pages. But it did meet the qualifications for our search. So look at this other one here on gene therapy. You look on page 961, you've got a couple of words that match there. 962, the same thing. This particular database is weird in that it didn't even look for the entire word. It just looked for that string of characters. Not every database will do that, but in any case, you've pulled up something that's completely irrelevant to what you're doing in maritime research. All right, so in this case, what we had to do was obviously limit the search. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can limit a search. There's phrase searching, as opposed to just searching across the entire document. You actually limit your search to a string of words that have to appear exactly as you type them. And there's all the Boolean and, that is, the document has to have this word or phrase and that word or phrase, and that's obviously going to limit the text somewhat. Now let's start off with this Boolean here. Actually, we're doing both, but you see vessel length in quotes, and you see carrying capacity in quotes. Again, to remind you, not every database will do this the same way, but most databases will put a phrase in quotation marks. And so you see vessel length. Vessel has to appear right next to the word length, and carrying has to appear right next to the word capacity. And both of those phrases have to appear in the document. So this is going to narrow things down, right? Actually, it narrowed it down quite a bit. You see, we've only got 1,700 from our original 2,753 documents. On the other hand, if you look at these titles, our relevance is really not a whole lot greater here. The second and third perhaps have something to do with our, no, it's not, excuse me, the second and fourth. But obviously the others are completely irrelevant. So we need to expand our results, all right? So to doing that, I want to talk about truncation, wildcards, or the Boolean or. Truncation is when you put a symbol at the end of a word, and then anything, it could be any text that follows that word. So it's a great way to catch various forms of a word. Wildcards is a way of basically omitting just one character, so that it could be any character within just within a particular word that you're trying to substitute. And of course, the Boolean or, it has to have this or that or both. So in most databases, not all, the truncation character is an asterisk. If you're not getting the results when you're doing something like this, when you're doing a search and trying to limit, then please just, again, look at the help and look for the word truncation. Same with wildcard. So wildcard in this instance is only going to be, it's just the one character. In this database, it happened to be a question mark. You can see that what we're looking for is vessel or vessels possessive, right? Because it's any characters that follow the word vessel. Length can only be one character or none. So you can get lengths, but you couldn't get lengthy because that's two characters. Okay, and we're ending that phrase, vessel length or vessels length or vessels length, or vessel's length, vessel lengths, etc., right? Those have to appear as a phrase, but you've got a lot of different combinations of words that appearing as a phrase, and you've got carriage, carries, carrying, carried, etc., capacity, capacities, etc. Those two, the forms of both of those words have to appear one after the other in that exact range, but it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of what the forms of those words are. Right? So in this case, 37 results. I'm expanding, but it's still, I think I could do better. What we can also do is add or, right? In this case, notice that I'm also using a technique called nesting, which is where I'm putting parentheses around so that it's basically isolating that concept from the other words or strings that I'm using. So I have the vessel or hull, because we found some articles when we were wading through these things that in some cases they were using the word hull length. Notice that I have this near one. Not every database is going to have this. This is called proximity. It's like phrase searching, but what you're saying is that this word has to appear within so many other words of this other word. So vessel length as a phrase, or vessel near one length, same concept, but I could have done near two, near three, and those words have to appear somewhere fairly close together. But so what I'm saying is here, with this nesting using the parentheses, vessel length or hull length, what we also found as we waded through the documents, this is something you need to do when you find something relevant, browse it, skim it, read it, so that you can get a sense of the terms that are used in this particular discipline. And in ship engineering, what we found is that vessel length or hull length is sometimes referred to as length overall, and sometimes abbreviated as LOA. We did not know this when we began our search. It was only after kind of delving in, skimming the literature, that we were coming up with, looking at the relevant hits. Had a lot of irrelevant stuff, But one way to narrow it down is take a look at the relevant things you find and look at the terms that they're using. So so we submit that, and like I say, we've got the nesting, where it could be either one of these terms near the word length, or length overall, or LOA. Okay, and so this is what we're searching with this phrase, correct? All right, but we got 20,000 results, and the reason for that is I've only gotten half of the concept that we're trying to get. So we're getting the vessel length. What we're not getting is the part about its relation to carrying capacity. So here, if you look, I've had to do another set of nesting for the possible phrases that can be used, or terms that can be used for carrying capacity. One thing we found, again, searching through the literature that was relevant, was that often the word used was tonnage. So we've got carrying capacity, etc., or tonnage, okay? And we've kind of got this thing double nested, if you look at that top term there, because we want to have all of that concept, vessel or whole length, vessel length or whole length, or length overall, or LOA, and we want to set that off apart. We've nested that, and we link that with the nested term for carrying capacity, capacities, blah, 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 or tonnage, okay? So I hope that's clear. You can go back and look at this example yourself, but what we've shown you here is a little bit of Boolean or and, as well as and, so we're limiting ands expanding at the same time, and we're doing that with also limiting and expanding using the proximity, the phrase, but we're also expanding by using wildcards. So you see there's a lot of little tricks going on here. And what we get here is 573 results, which is certainly better. Maybe a little bit too long to go through, but remember, we also, with this, might still be getting some of those irrelevant terms. So how do we get rid of that? Well, there's the not, okay? So in this case, I just want to say that when you use the Boolean not, sometimes it doesn't work at all. Sometimes it doesn't limit in any way. But when it does work, it will limit. So if we had a database that was strictly covering maritime things, then this would probably suffice. But if you remember, our other data, our search also had medical terms or as well as legal terms. So we added yet another nest so that we've got that one entire concept about vessel length and its carrying capacity, but we want to make sure that we don't have words having to do with medicine or law or legal or something like that. So we don't have medicine or medicinary, we don't have law, lawyers, we don't have legal, legalistic, etc. Okay, so we've got here the sort of double nested Boolean, half gainer with a twist search. But you look at those results, 228 results. That's probably something you could spend the better part of an afternoon working through, and being fairly certain that you could cull that in a reasonable amount of time, and probably come up with 50, 60 good articles that are on your topic. More maybe less, but in any case, this is a good subset that you can wade through. So you can save yourself a lot of time if you know the pitfalls of full text searching, and you know how to get around them using some of these techniques. And remember, although all these databases tend to have the same functions, they don't always work the same way. So you might have to go to help and look up proximity searching, or phrase searching, or how to do Boolean, or how to do nesting, how to do wildcards and truncation. So they may not do it in the exact same way, but they probably have something that you can use like that. Also, in today's databases, it's not like in my day where we literally type these commands in the terminal. You've got advanced search interfaces that have multiple text boxes, and they have options where you can select whether it's going to be and or not, and then type in your term. And you can say, oh, it's going to be a phrase. So all of this is actually going on under the hood, basically. But with the today's web-based advanced searches, you don't have to necessarily type it in as I've done here, and know all these little arcane commands. You just have to know the concepts. and be able to execute them. Okay. The thing is about full text searching is it even if you know all the tricks and you're really good at it, it doesn't mean you're going to catch things that you can miss relevant things, and you can still sometimes get some junk you don't want. Um, let's look. I've got an example here. This is actually true. I've seen students do this. They go up to the database and they type the word marine pollution. And I've seen an article which mentions ocean pollution, pollution of the sea, oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, even makes a reference to MARPOL, but it never actually used the term marine pollution. So consequently, that article is not going to show up when it's clearly relevant to what the researcher was looking for, right? So how do we get around that? That's one of the limits of full text searching. Um, is that you can have a term that's employed by a user that has more than one meaning or context. For example, a user searches for a document on piracy, and of course, he's going to retrieve acts of kidnapping and robbery at sea, which is, in our line of work, that's what you want to see. But don't forget, it can also pull up unlawful duplication of copyrighted material. Piracy is also used, intellectual piracy, right? One way around this is through searching metadata, that is, data about data. Okay, it's based on fields, so you have specific fields, not just the text that's in the document itself, but metadata added on top of it, provided by catalogers, such as the author field, the title field. They perhaps add subject headings, as they're called. The name of the publisher, the date things were published, and these can be in discrete fields, and these searches can be searched, individually or paired in a way that bypasses the text or supplements the text searching that you're doing. So let's say you have an example. You're looking for a book that is by Martin Stopford, and if you just type Martin Stopford, chances are he's a pretty prolific and famous author. There are documents about Martin Stopford, but if you type that term in the author field, you're only going to get things that were written by Martin Stopford. Another example, you've got an article that happens to reference an event that took place in 2010. You're not interested in anything that took place in 2010 particularly. You're looking for a book that was published in 2010. And of course, by using the date field of the publication, that you're going to save yourself a lot of time, because that 2010 in a full text document could appear in millions of titles, right? Okay, another thing about searching metadata is we tend to use very formalized metadata. For instance, it's common, we use thesauri, where we have one accepted term for a concept or a person or a place, and that's the term that is used in these discrete fields, particularly in subject headings, author fields, etc. So, for instance, in the Library of Congress, which subject headings, which is a huge and widely used thesaurus by libraries, if you were to type the word seafarers in a subject heading, you would get a reference in a good database anyway saying use merchant mariners. Now, I don't really know anyone, since I've been working with maritime folk, that actually uses that term merchant mariners, but that is the official subject heading. So you're not going to get anything if you type seafarers in that subject field. You'd have to use merchant mariners. Same thing, ports. We don't want to have two different concepts, two different words for the same concept. So if you're going to use the subject headings, ports is the wrong word. You use harbors. And again, same with places and place names. So Persian Gulf is the word that the Library of Congress uses for Arabian Gulf. Now, these are not my personal preferences. This just happens to be this thesaurus that's been maintained for over 100 years, and it's huge volumes and volumes of references and telling catalogers what official terms to use. this is what well, the terms you have to use. Now you can search for seafarers, just don't put it in the subject field, or the same with ports or Arabian Gulf. Those words may well appear in the full text, and that's the whole concept of this. So if you type merchant mariners, you're going to get documents that refer to seafarers in the text. You type harbors, you're going to get documents about ports. It's just that we can only use one term. Now, you don't necessarily have to know these terms. In fact, nobody can memorize them all. If you find a relevant document in your search, open it up, look at the detailed view, and often you will see subject headings in there. If those subject headings are offered as a hypertext link, you can click that subject heading, and it should pull up every other document in that database that has that subject heading. So all you have to do is browse around a little bit, do a search that trying to get your best using the full text concepts. Or if you have an author or have a subject in mind, great. But when you find something relevant, take a look at the more detailed record and see if it has subject headings. And of course, you can also enter a subject heading in the subject field of an advanced search. I talked about only one accepted term for a concept, person, or place. Well, the opposite is true. You only want one concept per term. What do I mean by that? Well, piracy. The Library of Congress has two subject headings for piracy, one being what we're thinking of, that's the top one there. And piracy, as an intellectual piracy, has to be followed with parentheses, copyright. So if you were to click on the second one, you'll get all the intellectual copyright violation type articles would be showing up, or at least any one of those articles in that database that uses that subject heading. And remember that even though there is kind of a science to this, and that librarians are pretty particular people, they're still human. Not every librarian will use the same subject headings and won't always use them the same way. So sometimes you have to find 2 or 3 different terms. But again, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of documents and millions of words of text. So this is at least a better way of helping you narrow down your search. Okay, well, you can use those expansion and limiting techniques that I talked about in the first part when we were searching just the full text, but they also work with metadata. So you could, truncate an author's name, for instance, or use a wildcard if you didn't know the exact spelling. And you can use these terms. You could not, for instance, something on not publisher World Maritime University. I'm not interested in anything in the publisher field that has the word World Maritime University. And you can use these so not only with metadata fields, but you can also use them in combination with full text. So my advice is just jump in, wait around. Look for what's relevant, see why it's relevant, looking both at the full text and at the detailed record of the metadata. Obviously come by the library if you need some help. Well, listen, I'm off for my vacation. I'm handing it back to Anna, and I hope you guys get something out of this. It's been fun. See ya.